Welcome back to Paranormal Roundtable. I'm your host, Josh Turner, and with me is my guest and, of course, my co-host, Martin Nunley. And we got a lot to talk about, so let's jump right back into it and let's continue. Thank you.
Well, I'll tell you another experience I had that, when I got into doing exorcisms because of this, because I would meet people that needed help, and then I would go home and I would be like, okay, what I just witnessed earlier, that person was 100% possessed, and those manifestations of demons I just witnessed are real. There's no doubt in my mind they left. There's no doubt in my mind they hate the name of Jesus. They can't stand it. That's where all the power is, And I'm like, I have no doubt about any of that. And I know they left. I know they left that person. Here I come back to this house, and I can't get them out of this house. It was like a cruel joke, And I literally would sleep laying on my back with my Bible open on my chest. That's how I would sleep, because I was like, I'm sure there's some spiritual stuff that is not happy with me right now, because, they hate you anyway. But imagine if you've cast some into hell, out of a person and into hell, they hate, now they're really mad, And then I'm going back into this possessed environment, and it was not a nice experience. I even had at one point in one deliverance session, I cast, and I had help with my family, help with this, but we cast 19 demons out of this individual, and pretty much from what I could tell, they were all rooted in Irish ancestry. That individual had Irish ancestry, which I'm Irish, and I get it. That you go back into Ireland a few hundred years, or go before St. Patrick was there, and they were very pagan. There was a lot of bad stuff going on there. So I go home after this. This was like a few days later, whatever. And again, I lived alone, and I go home. I shut off my alarm, my home alarm system. I go into my office, and I go to check my email. And when I went to type in my username, there was already a username typed in. And the username that was typed in on my computer was Irish 19. And I thought, where did that come from? What? And then I was like, oh no, Irish 19, that's a reference to the 19 demons that were rooted in Irish curses. And the other thing that occurred to me then was, okay, if somebody hacked my email from another location, that's not going to show up on my computer in my house. Somebody typed that in on my computer in my house, or something, I should say. Right. And it was just to mess with me. It was all about intimidation and taunting, but that's the kind of things I was dealing with there. There's a lot more than that, believe me, but that's why I called the book Nightmare in Holmes County, was because, I felt like I was in a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. And, it was funny. I ended up having complete victory over that situation, but the people that bought the house wanted me out right away. They did not give me much time to find another house. So the girl I was dating at the time, she was really helpful, and she found this house in Tuscarawas County. And I ended up talking to the realtor, and I explained my situation, and he said, you know what? He said, go ahead and move in. He said, I know you just sold that other property. I know you're going to get your mortgage for this house. So just move in. And when your mortgage closes, we will settle up, which that's pretty nice, And I said, okay, I really appreciate that, So I move into this house. It's a 2-story brick house with a huge yard that's all fenced in. There's a massive detached garage right beside it. It's like you could fit 2 tour buses in easy, And there's another little garage at the back of the property. And I move in, and just very subtle things began happening in this other house. And about a week after, well, I'll tell you, the first night I was in the house, I'm laying, I didn't even have time. I just moved in. So I'm laying in a bedroom upstairs on the floor with my cats. And I'm just laying there and I'm looking at this closet door and I'm just kind of looking at the woodwork and thinking, yeah, whoever built this, you know, they did a good job. That looks, you know, they had good woodworking skills, you know. I'm just thinking like that. And all of a sudden, it's like out of the blue, I hear a voice in my head say to me, you know nothing about the history of this house. And then I thought to myself, that's true. I don't know anything about the history of this house. I believe that voice was the Holy Spirit because, I mean, I don't know where else it came from, you know? So yeah. I said a little spiritual warfare prayer and just said, I renounce any sin that ever happened here and I bind the demons in Jesus' name. You know, very generic prayer. I wasn't specific about anything, but that was kind of strange. First night I'm in the house. Around a week later, I came home. And again, I lived alone. At this time, I had my bedroom all set up. My cousin, who was an electrician, he started helping me as soon as I moved in. He put in like a satellite TV outlet in the bedroom I chose as my bedroom, which was the bedroom upstairs to the left of the bathroom. And that becomes a significant point. But he did all that. He did that room right away because he knew I was going to use it for my bedroom. And he said, you know, this house is double bricked. He said, it's 2 layers of brick thick. He said, when I was drilling through to run the cable in, he goes, it's 2 layers of brick. That's really weird. That's like a commercial property, you know? So I didn't think much of it. And I came home, like, again, about a week later, and I go upstairs and I open my bedroom door and my bed is sitting crooked. My bed's not sitting the way I left my bed sitting. It's angled now. And I thought, okay, so my cousin was here. I bet he came in here today, and I bet he was checking some of his work, and he moved my bed. That has to be it. I'm sure that's what happened. So I straightened my bed. My bedroom door was shut at that point. I lay down in bed, and when I shut my eyes, it was like, I believe what I had was a vision, because it was not like how your mind normally pictures things. And it was like when I shut my eyes, it was like I was standing outside my bedroom door looking down the staircase. And there was a hooded figure coming up the staircase. And it was obviously a black hood. And I could see its face. And it looked like an old man. And he looked dead. He had like the complexion of a body in a casket. You know, he looked dead. And he had a creepy grin on his face. He was somewhat slouched a little bit. And he was coming up the stairs. And he had a creepy grin on his face. And I opened my eyes and I was like, what in the world was that? I'm not scared. I'm sure, you know, my cousin moved my bed. I'm sure he did it. He was here working. He moved my bed. I'll ask him about it tomorrow. I have nothing to worry about. There is no way this house could be haunted. You know, I shut my eyes. There it is again. It's like I'm standing outside. This happened about 4 times, I believe it was altogether. And after the last time I said out loud, I said, in Jesus' name, I renounce every sin that's ever happened in this house, and I bind the demons in Jesus' name. I think I even said, and I cast you out or something in Jesus' name. I shut my eyes. There's no more vision. There's no more hooded figure. And I went to sleep. But I told 4 people about that incident. I told the girl I was dating and her oldest son. We went out for pizza, and I said, hey, I got to tell you guys something. It's kind of odd. I'm sure there's nothing to it because there's no way I could live in 2 houses back to back that are haunted, you know? So I told them about it. Then I told my best friend and I told my mom. And as it turns out, the following weekend, my neighbor comes over on Saturday, just says, hi, I call him Steve in the book. I changed his name. But he just, you know, introduces himself and goes back home. And he lived 2 houses away from me. So then on Sunday, he comes back over, and I'm there with my mom and my sister and my brother-in-law, and we're on the porch talking. And he comes back over, and he's got his girlfriend with him. And he welcomes me to the town. He says, "Hey, you're welcome here. If you need help with anything, just let somebody know. We all help each other, so just let us know." And I said, "Okay, I appreciate that." And he said, "Well, that's the good news. Now for the bad news." And I knew what he was going to say. And I looked at him and I said, "You're going to tell me my house is haunted?" And his eyes got big, his mouth dropped open, and he said, "Yeah, man, it is." He said, "Some dude killed himself in your basement a long time ago." I turned around and I had told my mom. I had had enough stuff happen in the house that I had told her. I said, if I didn't know any better, I would think something followed me from Holmes County, but I know it couldn't have. I said, something's not right here. I had told my mom that prior to this incident. And I turned around after he told me the house was haunted. I turned around and looked at her and I said, "I told you." And she said, "You did." My sister's going, "Oh, no, not again. What's he talking about?" Because she knows what we just experienced in Holmes County, And I was very confident at that point. I said, "You know what? It's okay. I'm a Christian. I dealt with this before. I'll deal with it again." I fully believed that, at that point. So I knew after he said, "Well, I got other things to tell you, but I'll talk to you later." And he left and went back home. And I'm thinking, I really would like to know what those other things are, But that night I knew that, okay, here's the funny part. I had moved into 225th Street. I started writing Nightmare in Holmes County. And I would be sitting in my office at 225th Street, which is a haunted house. I just didn't know it yet, writing about the last haunted house, And after Steve told me that and confirmed it, yeah, this house is haunted, I knew it as well as I knew my own name. I knew I was to write the book about 225th Street first, and that it was to be titled 225th Street. I knew it. It was like it was downloaded to me. This is what you do, So I put Nightmare in Holmes County on the back burner, and I put all my energy into researching 225th Street. So I started contacting people that had lived there. I started tracking down people that had lived there before me, and their stories were horrific. Every family that had been there before me sold the house to another family and never told them it was haunted, never told them there was a suicide, even though they all knew it. They all knew it, and they never told anybody. And I'm not blaming them for that, though. I think they were I think they were just like, I need out of here, But
right.
Their stories, and the thing was, is I went through finding these people and tracking them down and interviewing them. I mean, I went to great lengths, and I was like very meticulous when I interviewed them. And a lot of their stories were very similar, and they were very similar to the same things I was experiencing. For example, at one point I was put into contact with there had been a suicide in the house in 1958 on March 1st. And now, as it turns out, by all my calculations and everything I could find on my own timeline and my work schedule and everything, the night that I had the weird vision of the hooded figure was March 1st, 2010. Very strange so-called coincidence. Okay. Well, I ended up contacting the guy who had committed suicide is the same individual that built the house. And I ended up contacting his granddaughter. And when I would call these people, this is kind of how I would go about the phone call. I would introduce myself. I would give them my name, and I would say, you have, I would say, I'm buying this house at 225th Street that you used to live in. And you have every right to think I'm crazy, but I have to ask you some questions. And then at that point I would say, did you ever have anything strange happen to you? And they would just go off on all these stories, So when I contact the granddaughter, I said that to her. And I said, did you ever have anything strange happen? And she said, why? What did you have happen? The way she said it was kind of eerie. And I said, well, I'm not saying there's anything to this, and I told her the story about my bed moving and having the vision of the hooded figure. And when she started talking again, her voice was shaken. Like she was like very scared. And she said, I'm really taken back that you're saying these things to me. She said, that hooded figure, I know what you're talking about. Then she proceeded to tell me that she would have a reoccurring dream of going to the house to see her grandma after the suicide had occurred, and that hooded figure would be in the house. She said that, I said, do you know where the suicide happened? And she said, nobody ever told me, but I always believed it was in the root cellar, because when I was there and grandma would go in the root cellar, she would tell me to wait outside when she went in. She said, it then got to the point where I began seeing that hooded figure in my own house. And she said at one point, it grabbed me and started pulling me out of bed. And she said, I believed that it was the devil himself when he was taking me to hell. And she said, I have become a very religious person because of all this. Well, she told me the truth. She is a very religious person, a very nice person. But that was a life-changing experience, what she went through, you know. Fortunately, it drove her to God and not, the other way. But she then told me that, she never cared for her grandpa. He was mean. He she didn't like him. And I'm thinking that's strange. Most kids love their grandpa, But
right. Let me ask you this, Patrick.
Okay.
At either of the locations that you lived in that were haunted, did you ever see any strange lights or anything like that on the properties?
Yes. In Holmes County, one night I went to go to bed, and there's a picture of the front door in the book. There's more than one, but anyway, there's a window on the front door. And this was kind of how I've always been. I don't trust people. I always make sure my doors are locked. That's how I've always been. Before I go to bed, I make sure everything's locked up. Right. But I walked into the foyer, and I walked over and looked out the front door for some reason, and it was all lit up around my car. My car wasn't in the garage. It was sitting in front of, I parked it in front of the garage. It was bright, all lit up around my car. And I thought, well, you dummy, you forgot to turn the lights off on the front of the garage, so go turn them off before you go to bed, So I go out, I turn off the security alarm and everything, and I go into the garage, and I go to flip off the lights, and the lights are turned off. I turned them back on. There was a window in the garage that I could see the light. When I turned the lights back on, I could see the light through that window. The light came on outside. I shut the door, turned the light off, shut the door, set the alarm, went back and looked, and everything was pitch dark outside. I have no idea. I really don't think that was those lights, and something turned the lights on and off. At the very least, something turned the light on and then turned it back off, which is creepy. But at the very worst, there was something else illuminating my car. I mean, right. That was creepy.
Yeah, that's a big part of haunting too. These orbs, these lights, and that's pretty common. I mean, yeah.
Well, I'll tell you about orbs. This is really messed up, but after I wrote 225th Street in 2011, I did a bunch of radio shows. I was done radio programs all the time and everything, and other people started reaching out to me and needing help. And there was one girl in particular. The story of her exorcism is going to be in a book I'm working on now. But her exorcism, she told me she thought her house was haunted. And she's telling me all these reasons and all this weird stuff she's telling me. And I knew plain as day, it's not your house. You're possessed. And the demons are messing with you because they're in you, And I didn't know how she would take it when I had to tell her that, but I knew it. I knew that's what was going on. Well, it turned out she took it very well, and it turned into a full-blown exorcism. And for about a week after that, in my house I live in now, I'm telling you, my house I live in now is not haunted, but I have a lot of paranormal activity, and it's because I get messed with because of what I've written about. You know, when you're shining a light in the darkness, you know, the darkness will mess with you. It's that simple. And
Right.
I remember
Yeah.
there was like a week that was so bad. Remember I told you about those, that weird sign I get when I'm discerning something spiritual? I would get like those intense goosebumps.
Mm-hmm.
I would be getting them so bad that it literally did hurt. It literally felt like I had needles sticking all over me, like all across the backs of my arms and my back and everything. And I actually, during that time, I would actually see orbs in my house. Not in a picture, not on a video. I saw them. And at one point, I remember I was laying on my couch. I was kind of creeped out, and I kept sleeping down on my couch. Now, that sounds wimpy, but I'm just saying, everybody's got their breaking point, But I was laying on the couch, and my cat Moses was sitting over by the door that goes out of my living room and goes into my kitchen, or it goes into like a little, I don't know what you would call it, like an entryway. And then you can turn right and go down the stairs and get down to my basement, or you can go straight into my kitchen. Well, Moses is sitting he's in the living room, sitting close to that door. I heard my basement steps creak like somebody was coming up the stairs. And when I heard that, I saw him. He turned around and looked down the stairs. And then his head, he looked like up and like followed something that like it floated over his head. And that was all during that time I literally was seeing orbs in my house now, I had one time during that whole time period too, when I was like actively doing a lot of deliverances. I was laying on my couch again, laying on my back, and I was woke up by something pulling on my leg. It was like, and it was like, as I woke up and let go of my leg, and my leg fell back down to the couch. So, these are things that are not even like living in a haunted house things. These are like you're getting a visitation because you're fighting the good fight and you're in a war. It's that simple. We're in a war. When you fight the war, you're gonna get attacked. But that's when you said about orbs. That's what came to my mind. I've seen orbs in pictures in other houses that I had to deal with that were haunted. I dealt with for other people. So yeah, you're right about that. That is something that happens a lot in haunted houses.
Yeah, that's go ahead, Martin.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, it's definitely right. And when you start talking about these things and telling the truth about these things, they don't like it. Mm-mm. So they will, do things to you to get you to stop talking about them.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you think everyone that learns the truth and their life has changed for good, man, they're mad about that. That's the last thing they want,
Right.
And, so
they're everybody to fumble around in darkness and not know anything and or believe the wrong thing. So once you start telling the truth about them, they don't like that. So there's going to be some repercussions over that.
Yeah, and I can tell you when I'm actively writing and researching, I get a lot of activity in my house that I'm in right now. But, we were talking about, some of the witchcraft stuff too. I've had things happen here that I 110% believe happened because I went head to head with a witch. This is not somebody that's Amish. This is somebody that's in the occult over his head. I had to, unfortunately, deal with this person for about 2 years, unfortunately. And I stood up to him. And that's how it's going to be, And it didn't end well for him. But I had experiences where there was somebody else he was very close to that I also went head to head with, and it didn't end well for them. And I'll tell you two different things. The one incident, you're going to think this is crazy. I mean, I'm going out on a limb saying this on the air, but I'm telling you.
Oh no, surely not.
I came home. I had to run to the store one day, and it was raining, but it was not thunderstorming. It was raining. And I think I went to get sweeper bags or something. I can't remember, because I was cleaning my house. And I came home and I pulled in my driveway. And now my house is technically 3 stories. I have a full attic and then 2 stories, so it's technically 3. So it's pretty tall. And the house to my right, if you're facing my house, the house to my right's a single story. It's a ranch. I have a massive oak tree in front of my house and a massive oak tree behind my house. There's trees in front of the neighbor's house, Well, I pull in my driveway. It's raining, so I'm in a hurry. I jump out of my car. I step up on my step, and I hear this loudest noise. It's a crash. I knew something got struck by lightning. And I'm thinking, did a tree get struck? I'm looking around. I knew something got struck by lightning. I mean, it scared me. I can't even tell you how loud the crash was. And I couldn't find anything that got struck. So I go in the house and I'm like, well, that was weird. And I'm running my sweeper and I turn my sweeper off and I hear, this is a little while later, I hear sirens. I look out the window. The neighbor, that ranch style house, there's flames pouring out the garage windows. So the house was burning like you would not believe. So the fire department shows up. My whole street is crowded with people, and I go over after they get the fire put out. And I talked to the fire department and the firemen, and I talked to the main one. And I said, I could be crazy when I'm telling you this. I might be wrong, but I think that house got struck by lightning. And he said, why do you think that? And I said, I came home from, the store, and I got out of my car. And as soon as I stepped up on my step, that I heard this loud crash. It was super loud. And I said, it had to be something getting struck. And I think it was that house. And he said, yeah, you're right. We already determined it was a lightning strike. So here's the weird part. The lightning struck as soon as I got out of my car. In a matter of seconds, literally probably 3 seconds. Why did the lightning strike the house that was the lowest point on the street? Why didn't it strike my house? Or why didn't it strike one of those massive trees? Why did it strike the house that's the lowest one? And it struck at exactly the time that I got out. As soon as I got out of my car, boom, there it happened. That was when I was actively going head to head with the guy that was in over his head into the occult. And I mean, this guy's into it bad. And he's got websites out there talking how to conjure demons and everything else. And I have talked to, and I mean, maybe I'm crazy. I believe that lightning bolt was meant for me and an angel intervened. Maybe I'm wrong, but the stuff I saw out of that guy and stuff I know for a fact he's into, I really believe that's what happened. I have talked to some people that are now Christians that used to be into the occult, and they told me straight up, I asked them about it, and they said, yeah, matter of fact, witches love using the elements to try to bring about bad things on other people. So I think that is a possibility. I'll give you another one. Another incident that happened around that time, I have a music studio in my house. It's not attached to my house. And I am the only one with the keys to that studio. You have to go through 3 locked doors to get in there. There are no windows. I go in there right at a time when I'm dealing with these people that are horrible. And I have a dehumidifier in there, so I was going to empty the dehumidifier because it was summertime and it gets humid and whatnot. I go in there and there is a dead sparrow laying in the middle of the floor. How did a dead sparrow get into my studio? And it was placed in there dead. It was already dead. How did that happen? It's impossible. How did it get in there through 3 locked doors? And so I looked into it, and I knew that Satanists, a lot of times when they kill somebody, they will leave bird feathers or a dead bird at the scene. I don't know why they choose to do that, but they do it. And I looked into this, and I found out that they will also leave a dead sparrow as a threat. They'll like leave it on your doorstep. In my case, there's no doubt in my mind they left it in the studio, and it was done through paranormal means, because it's impossible for that to have gotten in there. They couldn't leave it on my step because I would have probably assumed a neighborhood cat did it, you know? So I fully believe that, you know, that was another incident of, you know, the issues you deal with when you go head to head with witches and people that are into that kind of thing.
Do you think that all this stuff like is behind you now? Or, I mean, do you?
No, I'm going to give you a quote from, you know who Christopher Quarantino is?
Yeah.
He used to be Christopher Lutz. He grew up in the Amityville horror house. Not grew up, but he spent however long they were there. He was the littlest of the Lutz family, the youngest boy. And I'm friends with him. And when I first wrote 225th Street, me and him became friends. And I was fortunate. I got to, you know, Skype talk with him sometimes late at night. We'd just sit there and trade stories and talk about things. And he has the same perspective I do on a lot of this stuff. You know, so it was really, really refreshing conversation. But he said this to me, and it always stuck with me. He said, you know, once you've experienced this, you can't go back. And he said, and we're going to deal with this till the day we stand before the throne. And I said, you're absolutely right. You know, and that always stuck with me, the way he worded that. It's like very profound, and it's very true. You know, this is part of life now. You know, you see the reality, you see the spiritual realm, you get it, you understand it, and now it's a part of life. You know, it's something I'll deal with forever, and so be it. I mean, I think that, you know, God gives us gifts to deal with those things, like discernment, like gifts of knowledge, things like that, and to give you the upper hand. But yeah, I do think it's something, and I'll be honest, I think if you guys have dealt with this, you probably will too. I just think that's how it works.
Right.
You know, one of the things when you were talking about the Amish and like now there's this misconception that they're all just peaceful, fun-loving people that just kind of, you know, their idea of fun is just taking a wheel and running a stick over it, and that's their entertainment, and they have a good time, and that's not the case. I'm here to tell you right now that is so far from the truth. And I'll tell you what happened with me. I had 3 Amish people who used to work with us. Me and my brother, and Scorpion can attest to this, and my friend Squid. We all work together. There's a whole group of us, you know. We're still friends to this day. Years ago, I ran a nightclub, and I started out as just a bouncer and worked my way up. But anyway, I had a guy come to me, and he said, "I need a job." And he was just a kid. I wasn't much older than him, a few years maybe. And we were all just youngsters, but I gave him a job as a bouncer. Next day, he's like, "Hey, I got a friend of mine who we all came from the same place, and it was up there in Amish country. It was either Pennsylvania or Ohio. I can't remember. I forget. But anyway, it was up there where there's a lot of Amish people." And he said, you know, he wants a job. Well, the other kid came because we needed more people. And I gave him a job too. And then he had a sister, and he asked me about her. So like the third day, she came and she worked with us. Well, she became like a waitress at the bar or whatever. And we had the largest dance club in the city, a city that's full of bars and restaurants. So it's quite an accomplishment. It's a big place. It was a hip hop club. And so I asked the kid if they could handle themselves. And they said, yeah, you know, we used to fight in the barn and stuff and all this stuff. And they had this, he talking like this, he had this weird, you know, and I was like, where are you guys from? Like, what, you know, and they told me we are Amish, you know, and I'm like, you know, what the F is that? You know, like I kind of knew vaguely what it was, you know,
Yeah.
And my friend Chico was a luchador wrestler. And so anyway, he goes, "Oh, I know what that is. That's the people with the beards and all." Because they didn't have beards. These kids had, they weren't like, and I said, "Oh, okay." And it kind of hit me. I said, "Yeah, I know what this is." But I didn't have a lot of experience with it. And the only thing I really knew about them was that they didn't believe in technology and they rode around in buggies and blah, blah, blah. And the one kid, his name is Zeke, and he was one of the kids that recently, he's a grown man now. We're all older, but he was telling me about, he goes, these people that are messing with you, he's like, be very careful. They have a book. They call it their companion. Or something. I forgot how he worded it. It's called My Friend or My Companion.
It's called Powwow or Long Lost Friend.
Long Lost Friend. There you go. That's what it is.
I have a copy of that. I won't have it in my house. It's in a safety deposit box at a bank.
Yeah. It's called Long Lost Friend, and it's a book of magic. And then he said, they practice powwow. Me and you talked about that too, Patrick.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so he told me about, we got to drinking and hanging out, and we were partying, and he was like, I was like, so why did you leave the ordinance, which is what they call it, And he says, well, he goes, there was a lot of molestation, and there was a lot of rape, and the one kid had been molested by a male, and then there was a lot of that going on, and then there was a rape of this female. And so they left during Rumspringa, and they didn't leave at that time. Like they went and they had Rumspringa, but it convinced them to leave because they got to. That's where they get to decide whether they're going to stay in the Ordinance or they're going to go out into the world, into the English world, is what they call us. And he said, we decided we're going to go out into the English world. So after some more abuse and some more things that happened, they decided that they didn't want to do it anymore, but the two left before the other guy. And he was just the friend of the family, and he stayed around for a few years, and then one day he just said, "To heck with this," and he started talking to some of the Mennonites who actually did go out into the world and would experience it and whatever. The Mennonites are kind of like their connection, the hardcore Amish. The Mennonites are their connection to the free world, which is the English world. Yeah. So they let them commit the sin because they don't want to be the sinners or whatever it is. It's ridiculous. But anyway, so he decided, Zeke is his name, and he decided he was going to leave, and so he got into a fight with his dad. And he punched him out, and he told him, "Go, leave, get out of here, Zeke. Don't ever come back." I don't know how he said it. I'm assuming it, and he's like, "I curse ye, your oatmeal." And so anyway, Zeke's like, he goes, "Yeah, I fought my own dad, and it was pretty bad, and I left." And so he was telling us all this stuff. And all my guys, the bouncers, everybody, we're just like, okay, a bunch of tough guys, rough trade, a lot of fighters, mostly I would say ex-military and convicts. That's kind of what made up my ship of pirates. And so they just didn't really fit in at first, but they had some they were pretty tough. And I guess growing up, beating each other up in the barn paid off because after a couple of fights, I could see they handled themselves. And he said, well, there's not really much to do. So I was talking to him with one of my friends, Chief, who's been on my show. He's a half Native American friend of mine who's an MMA fighter, and he's a wrestling coach now. And so he asked him. We were sitting there talking, and my friend Loki, and we asked them, like, "What do y'all do? Like, what do you do for fun?" And they're like, "Well, we drink, we fight, we smoke green corn, as they call it, which is marijuana."
Yeah.
And he goes, sometimes the Mennonites will get us drugs and we'll do cocaine. And I'm like, what? Wait, what? And when they started talking about that, I was like, what? I was like, is this during Rumspringa? He goes, no, this was just like, meth using, cocaine using, just things you would not associate with these supposedly peace-loving, fun people. They were involved in a lot of things, even prostitution. Like some of the girls were prostituting, and the free world or English world dudes would come and sleep with these Amish girls. It was really screwed up, the things they were telling us.
I'll tell you something really sick about that. When an Amish girl turns 12 years old at church, her father stands up and says, "My daughter is now of age." And then he sits down. Well, that's weird. Well, here's the rest of the story. That means when there's a candle in the window, the door is unlocked, you can come in and do stuff to his daughter. That's the honest to God truth.
Wow.
And, I mean, it is complete. You're right, though. It's completely sick. But I'll tell you another one. When my house sold in Holmes County, my realtor knew how I felt about the Amish. And she said, the one guy that's coming to do one of the inspections, you're going to like him. He thinks like you do. Well, the guy came to the house and we were talking, and he said, you know, I can't stand him. He said, I have a friend that drives them around in a van. And he said, these Amish guys pay him to take them to a prostitution house in Massillon, Ohio, and they go in and have sex with these prostitutes, and he has to wait on them and then drive them home.
Yeah, that's very common.
Yeah. It's like, if you're going to do all that, you might as well forget riding in the buggy, because you're not going to heaven. You know, I mean, it's ridiculous. And the abuse of the animals, the kids, it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible.
Yeah. And people don't realize them being cut off from the world is really, it's a cultish type thing.
It is a cult. Yes.
Me and my guys, and I can march about a dozen guys to my podcast, and mm-hmm. they can tell you. A lot of us still know Zeke. We keep in touch with him, but when he left, he dealt with a curse that was put on him, and a lot of bad things happened to these kids. Yep. They were in Florida, and a bunch of bad stuff happened, and then they ended up in Texas, and they made their way to Austin. But he now lives in Montana. He's been working on a ranch up there for several years. But he, as of late, has told me some crazy stuff, and about this weird smoke that'll appear on the property, because the guy that he was working for actually was he finally made enough money to buy a little plot for himself up there, you know. And he has this weird entity or creature that's been kind of like stalking him that looks like a goat man. Me and Barton were talking about that. And I was telling him, and this there's like this goat man looking thing, and it's gotten bad. Like he comes to his up to his house at night, and it's been like rooting around on the property. Attacked one of his dogs, didn't kill it, but he's convinced that the curse is still there, and he's been trying to deal with it for a long time. And he's had his bouts with alcohol and other things, you know, and just it really messed him up, you know, that from the time that they were young until now, it's just so, you know, and I get really aggravated when people try to sell me on the idea and convince me that they're all just peaceful, fun-loving people, and I'm like, no, that's not what I've been told, because
it's not true.
Yeah,
it is not.
I mean,
true.
There's 3 people that had told me this, but they say, oh, well, those are only 3 people who tell you blah blah blah. Well, there was a show that came out not too long ago, a few years ago, called The Amish Mafia, and I watched bits and pieces of it. I didn't watch a lot of it, but I got the gist of it. And my friend Zeke said that's very real. That's very much a real thing, because they have a 100%. Ton of money, and they don't really live the life that they present. It's a facade, and they use that to get, and they have a lot of power. I mean, they really do. They pay off local governments and officials to do.
Here's
corruption
the thing.
is pretty rife.
Yeah, the sheriff out there. I mean, I guarantee if anybody asked him if he knew my name, he would know exactly who I am, and he doesn't care for me, because I butted heads with him big time when I lived there, because he wouldn't do his job. You know, it was like, oh, so if they come and do all this to me, you're okay with it because I'm not Amish and they are, and they vote, and you'll get voted out if you arrest them. So that's how it works out there. I had a guy that I actually had come. I put on a bluegrass festival. My last Labor Day I spent in Holmes County, and I was like, I'm going to try to make this whole thing pay me, you know. So I knew the Amish were into bluegrass, so I hired some bluegrass bands and stuff to play, and charge people to get in and whatnot. And because I had a big field behind my house and everything, so there was this really nice guy. He wasn't Amish, but his wife was, and they. Like, he was having a lot of marital problems because of it. And he told me, and he came and he was in the one band. He was a really nice guy. He was a really good singer. And I became friends with the guy. He's a good guy. But he contacted me. I have all the notes from the deliverance. He contacted me, I think it was 2010, I think. And he said, I think I need a deliverance. And he told me, why. And he believed that his wife was putting curses on him because he left the Amish. And I made him renounce like that false religion. And like what he had, like the demons, like they left pretty easy once that was renounced. So that tells you what a stronghold that religion is, But wouldn't you know, he fully believed that he was being cursed, right? This guy's younger than me, and he was in good shape. He dropped dead. Just, I'm going to say in probably 2016 or something, he just dropped dead. And I didn't even know he died. I met somebody that was from Holmes County, and we were talking about different people we knew, and I asked if she knew that. I said his name, and she said, "Is he the one that died?" And I said, "What? He couldn't have died." She said, "Yeah, he did. Sure enough, he died." And I just wondered. Well, wonder if that death had anything to do with, the curses being put on him.
Well, Barton and me were involved very heavily in the investigation of the murders of the LBL.
Yeah.
And of course that involved a witness that came forward, and his story was that he was with this Amish family. Now he wasn't Amish himself or whatever, supposedly, because I don't really know his background. I just know what he's told us. But he claimed that they were an Amish family, and he was helping them relocate, and they had stopped in the LBL, and the family that was killed there was supposedly Amish, and they had left the ordinance. When you think about it, though, my first reaction was this was a curse, that something was put upon them, and it went after them, and it killed them. That's the first thing I thought about. And when I first started corresponding with the late Johnny Henderson, great guy, passed away last September.
Wow.
September, I believe it was September 10th, wasn't it, Barton?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And so when Johnny had passed away, and me and Barton are still very close with Elijah, his son Elijah Henderson, and Elijah actually was at our conference, and they were being told this story about the Amish family that was killed or whatever. And Barton, I told you, the first thing I told you was like, it had to be some kind of curse.
Yeah.
That's the first thing out of my mouth. And Barton and me, Barton and me kind of, kicked it back and forth. And then he was like, well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but this is the story. And then I told Johnny and Elijah the same thing. I was like, I've dealt with these people. Believe me, I know, because I've seen the damage that it did to the people that worked for me, and I saw they later on they got a couple more people that one of them was the little sister, Zeke's little sister, and then there was another kid that came that I didn't really know him that well, but he came later on, and they kind of just reaffirmed or whatever, confirmed to all of us, friends that my friends that I'm friends with, that this is what goes on there, and it's weird, it's ironic because Zeke's friend, who I'm not going to say his name because I don't have permission to. He doesn't like being out in the public, whatever. Zeke doesn't care, but starts with a J. Let's call him Jay. Jay actually is a mechanic. It's funny because he's a very good mechanic, and one of my friends from my hometown actually gave him a job, around here working on cars, and he's very smart and mechanically inclined, but he never would have had that opportunity, if he had stayed in with those people. And he always just says it was just it's like a cultish like nightmare. He was just kind of like, it was. Leaving was the best thing that ever happened to him, and they all are still God-fearing people, and they go to church and they believe, but they don't. They know that what that is, and and we're not sitting up here bashing the Amish, because I'm sure there are some good ones or whatever, that don't participate in these activities, but this is very common. It is very, very common. And after that whole thing happened, and I spoke out and I said something about the Amish, when I had said a few things or whatever, there were some people who kind of lashed out at me, claiming to be Amish. And one of them was this girl whose name, I probably shouldn't even say the name, but in Barton, I'm pretty sure you know who she was. But she was saying stuff on the comment section and just viciously attacking me. And then later attacking Barton and everybody else and saying all this crap about us. And I was just like, I said, how are you on the internet?
Exactly.
Commenting on YouTube if you're Amish. And of course, I know the answer is that she could be Amish, and because they don't really care. They don't really follow their rules. They're hypocrites. So I was like, yeah, she could be. She might be. And she was just saying a bunch of crap because, they do get cell phones and they do get a hold of technology and they hide it and whatever. And it's almost like a scam in some ways, that they're not really, And then when you go into their territory, which like I've been told by other people who were telling me stuff during that time period, they were telling me this stuff about how they had done research on them, not just you, Patrick, but a few other people, and they had found like abandoned buildings on the properties and stuff full of satanic symbolism and just all kinds of like, just bad stuff like dead animals and things like that. And it was very common. And I just was like sent a few pictures or whatever. And then my wife's like, she was just like, she was pretty freaked out because a lot of weird stuff was happening to us. And she was just like, don't look at those pictures. Don't talk about it. Blah, blah, blah. She was not having it. And being half Hispanic, I know I've also had a curse put on me by a bruja, and it was very similar. It was like it was very similar stuff. I mean, the Vietnamese curse I had put on me, it was the same. It was just the same thing, bunch of bad stuff happened, and I had to pray and pray and pray to try to break it and try to get it, resolved. But the first thing is even knowing that you've been cursed. You have to wake up to the reality that, hey, this is real. This is happening. I'm having these health problems. I'm having these shadow people or whatever they are roaming around my house. And then, there's all kinds of crap going on. And then you have to break it, and if you're very strong spiritually, it can be challenging, but if you're steadfast, you can do it. And if you have friends in your corner that are strong in the faith and people pray with you, you can get it done. But I'm going to tell you right now, if you aren't strong, you're a target, and then
that's right.
And it's very easy for these people like to I had a friend of mine who was Cajun, and he had told me about this woman that lived out in the swamp, and she was an old witch, and she was all like, everybody's like, oh, she's friendly, she's cool, she's whatever. Well, she was still a witch. And she got, you get on the wrong side of one of these people, and they'll come at you sideways. And she was aggravated by somebody, and you don't know what's going to aggravate them or set them off because
you're right.
I mean, and the thing is, it's like they're psychotic. It's like they might be sweet as pie, and then the next day they start flipping out on you and telling you all kinds of crazy stuff. Because my friend, he married a woman who was very much into Kabbalistic magic. And I kept telling, shouldn't say his name, but I kept telling him, I was like, me and my brother were telling him, dude, you need to knock that off. We both read the Kabbalah. We know what it is. It's a book of Jewish mysticism. And there's some bad stuff in there. And I told him, I said, dude. And so she was arguing with him one day about demons. There was an argument. And I was over there at his house, because we used to work together, and I was picking him up, and the guy was always in a bad mood. Nice guy when he was away from her, but when he was with her, he was always in a bad mood. And her name was Evelyn, and I called her Evelyn, like from He-Man, And so she said something one day, and I'm not joking. I was at the door with my friend Jerome from Germany, and we were both standing there, And I was looking down at my phone, and when we turned around to walk off, I looked up for a minute, and he said that I just saw, like, for a split second, her face from the side profile looked different, looked kind of weird. Like, I saw it really quickly. And he goes, dude, did you see that woman? Her face like changed into like a bird looking thing or something. And I was like, what? So I thought maybe, Jerome was smoking some weed or something before work or something. I was like, dude, are you high or something? He goes, no. And I was like, well, did you drink? Because I'm not going to lie, he's German, and his buddy, him and Otto, would drink like all day long and they'd never get drunk, which was weird. But they would drink. And I was like, maybe they were drinking really strong or something. I said, were you drinking? He goes, no. He's like, I just, did you see it? And I guess I was kind of like trying to pretend like it didn't happen to myself. And I said, dude, I think I did see it, but I don't want to, because I don't know for sure, So when our friend came out, we'll call him T. And I told him, I said, T, I was like, you look terrible. You look like you haven't slept in days or whatever. And he goes, I don't know, man. And I'm getting this weird rash. And he showed me, and I was like, dude. And he's living with this weird woman. And he goes, we got into an argument. And, and so that later on that evening, after we'd come back from doing the job, whatever, we went inside to his house because it was hot. And I was like, I just wanted to, he was going to, give me a soda or something. And so I was standing there for a minute, and she comes walking over there to me, and she dressed like Lily Munster or like, whatever the lady from the Addams Family, what's her name? Morticia,
Yeah.
Yeah, she dressed like her. She was real weird, goth to the point of like just ridiculousness. And so she's like, I have a question for you. You're smart about this kind of stuff. You're into the paranormal, right? And I said, yeah. And this was years ago. I was always into like collecting stories and stuff like that. And she goes, have you read the Kabbalah? And at that time, I had not. I had only read bits and pieces or like researched whatever. And she goes, well, you need to read it. It's really amazing, and it'll change your life. And I'm like, sure it will, but I don't want my life to be changed in that way, And she was just like, she's like, well, I was trying to tell, and we'll call him T, like that what demons are. And I said, well, what do you think demons are? And she goes, well, they're fragmented beings that were from another universe that have been they had been compressed or whatever. It was a very interesting theory. When I started reading it and reading into it, I thought, well, that's one way to look at it. And that's their take on it. But she goes, but they don't hurt you, and you can control them and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, wait, what? I was like, you don't have control over those entities. I don't give a crap what any religion tells you. There is only one way to control them, and we all three here know what that is. Exactly. And I told her, I was like, there's no controlling. You summon that, you call the bull, you get the horns. Yep. My cousin was a bull rider, and a bull once gored his and ripped his leg open, and his ephemeral artery was exposed. He lived. He's still alive to this day. He works he's a oil guy. He's, done well in the oil industry, but he's a good friend of mine, besides being my cousin, and I'm very proud of him. He's a very tough man, self-made guy. And, he never cried about it. He always said that. He was like, if you mess with the bull, you get the horns. Yeah. And he just was like, that's what happens, and he goes, you can't control that animal. It's a bull. It's going to do what bulls do. And I was like, you can't control these things. They're going to do what they do. And even if there are rules and laws and blah, 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 there's always outlaws that are going to break the laws and the rules. And that goes for the spirit realm too.
Yep.
And I try to tell people that, and they're just like, well, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And they'll go and hang up symbolism in their house ignorantly and not know what they're doing. And after all these years, 30 years of research now, I know when I see something, I'm like, I know what that is. And sometimes people just think, well, I think it's pretty. And so they'll hang it up in their house. And I'll be like, well, you might think it's pretty, but it actually has a meaning. And you're basically waving a flag for these things to come. And you're basically giving them permission. And I covered a case one time where these guys had done a ceremony, and they had drawn a circle with a pentagram, and they summoned this demon. And they said, oh, well, as long as it's in the circle. This is the most ignorant thing I'd ever heard in my life. They said, as long as it's in the circle and it's cool, you can't. Well, the first thing this demon did was start kicking sand over to break the circle.
Of course.
And I'm like, dude, and I guess they think that these things can't actually manifest into a physical being. I was like, you're bringing them, you're giving them power, you're offering them, whatever, and then you're summoning them and you're giving them basically the right. You're giving them to go, beyond their confinements. And you're transgressing against God, first of all. And when they do this, they have no idea what this demon is capable of. And
that's right.
So one of them was quick thinking, and he went and tried to go up and close it with a stick. And that thing just like snapped the stick, just it threw it like energy or whatever. It snapped the stick, and it just continued to break that circle. So they all fled. They all ran in different directions. And this thing began to chase them. And the way they described it was like this bluish white looking creature, or it was like white furred looking thing. It was like it was like the way you would describe like one of these cryptids, these inhumanoids, right? As you call them, Barton. And it's chasing them through the wilderness, in Michigan. And, we got this story, and these people were telling us this story. And I'm like, dude, that's what happens, and then it stalked a couple of them for like months, showing up and doing things. And these things have the upper hand because they can move in and out of our world. Like we can't go in and out of their world unless you're out of your body. And they can. They are not bound to. And when people would see this creature out in the woods, some people will be like, oh, I saw a Bigfoot, because that's what they think they're looking at. What they're looking at is a demon that's been summoned by somebody, and it's been let loose. And they were like, oh, it looked like a Bigfoot with horns, and they were telling me this nonsense. Yeah. And it doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, that's not what that is. It's a demon that's been let loose. Yep. And that happens more often than we could possibly imagine. And the Amish actually do this for fun. And I'm not joking. They literally are bored. I'm not joking. It sounds very like I'm giving you a simplistic BS answer, but the truth is they get bored because they don't have a lot to do, and they play around with magic. And powwow is just like this little goofy name that they name it like it's some joke. And they start when they're young, and then by the time they get older, they can be very powerful sorcerers or sorceresses. And
absolutely.
Mm-hmm, and they can curse the heck out of you.
The neighbor guy that wanted the right of way, what I found out was the kind of I found this out later from a guy that had been mixed up with them, and then he became like a newer order Mennonite and got away from them. And he said that he was taught witchcraft in the church. In the Amish church, he was taught witchcraft. And he told me that guy that had wanted that right of way, he said he is involved in witchcraft. And he said, and the kind that he's involved in has to be passed down from generation to generation, but it's passed from the parent to the opposite sex child. And he said, and his daughter has gotten into it so bad, he said she got in it over her head and lost her mind. And he said now she's in a mental institution. And I said, well, you know what that is? And he goes, yeah, demon possession.
Okay, folks, so that's going to do it for this episode. Tune into the next episode where I return with my guest and with Barton Nunley. And thank you for listening to PRT. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Good night.